Everybody. This is the weekly Static Site Editor Synchronous call. Um, Today, we are going to be focusing specifically on just checking in on the remaining issues for 13.1, as well as having a look at our 13.2 planned issues. Um, as we've done last time, we're going to do this milestone again, where the week before the milestone starts, we'll be focusing specifically on making sure that our issues for 13.2 have been thought through, that we've given it the necessary attention from a product feature point of view, understanding what it is we need to do, having any conversations around misunderstandings or looking at scope, how we can break things down to be more iteratively, as well as validating any technical approaches that we might want to validate. So that will be our main focus for this coming week, as well as wrapping up the remaining 13.1 issues. Before we look at the 13.1 issues, I want to just reiterate again that while we speak in terms of milestones, 13.1, 13.2, and so on, that is to create an understanding from a grouping point of view. When it comes to actual delivery, we discussed it last time, and I want to reiterate it, that we do not try and rush things into a specific milestone. If there's a reason that it can't be made, whether it's personal, that you just needed more time for yourself, or things that needed to be done, or the development took longer, that is okay. We are not in the business of trying to rush features out to make a milestone deadline. We're in a position where our product is primarily still used on GitLab.com. And we need to rather focus on continuous delivery. Just keep pushing out the features. That's my ask, that we don't. I'll try as best as possible to keep that. I know it can be confusing as we talk in terms of milestones, but think of our talking of milestones more just from a planning and grouping and focusing point of view, rather than this is a deadline that has to be met by all intents and purposes, causing you to have to work later or longer hours and stuff. So that is not the intention of that. It's more just to create focus around a batch of work that we're planning around. That said, I will admit that there are some, like if you look at source code, for instance, that one of the core elements of the GitLab product, with a lot of people in self-hosted environments that use it, if there's a bug and something like that, that might be holding somebody up, that's when we get kind of like specific about shipping something for a specific milestone, whether that's a patch release or security fix or next milestone and so on. But while we're still early on in our product development, that should not be our focus yet. And I will clearly communicate if there is a specific issue that has priority focus needed to be made by a certain time. So unless that is clearly stipulated, you can assume that we'll just focus on a continuous delivery point of view. Keep iterating on your issues, delivering functionality and value iteratively, and that's all that's required from you. Eric, would you like to verbalize what you're writing there?
I'm just writing down what you talked about being a bug in a certain milestone.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. All right. So with that, let's move on to our 13.1 remaining issues. I'll share my screen just for the sake of the recording. It will make things easier for those watching afterwards. So this is a list of all the issues that aren't in workflow verification at the moment. And I just want to run through it and make sure if the status is correct. Like for instance, there's a block one I can take off immediately as well, as long everything's not equal. Let's just filter that out as well. All right. So R&D, add markdown formatting shortcuts in the static site editor. So Jacques, I know you've done a whole bunch of stuff in, has done a write-up. Enrique and Derek, I'd appreciate it if you can just have a look at Jacques' planning that he did and just see if you have any concerns with it. And if you can just kind of like flag it if you picked that anything up. We won't be doing that development in 13.2, but it would be good just to kind of like from a wrapping up that that research that he did into how he suggests we approach it. It would be good if you could just have a look at that for us. Right, then the next one, Vasily, I think I actually just saw a notification come through earlier, just before this call, that of your first summary of this. So I'm going to ask the whole team to also go and have a look at this and go and review Vasily's initial write-up. And let's see if we can get some feedback from him this week on that. It would be good to wrap that up as well. Again, another one we won't tackle in 13.2, but we're trying to get ahead of where we actually want to work in terms of planning and research on these type of issues. Okay, implement repository file API, Vasily. I see it doesn't have a workflow status on it.
So I started working on that, but it's still in work in progress stage. And it's actually probably a question for Enrique. Do we need that endpoint for GraphQL migration? Or it's something like necessary, or it's something optional?
It is optional. Probably the most important endpoints that we need right now to are the ones about writing data to submit changes.
Okay. My question then would be is, do you envision still kind of like getting to it this week? Is it something that we should move over to 13.2?
So it was marked as a stretch issue. So I think it will, unless I get some free time, it's most probably will be postponed to 13.2 because I still want to finish it.
Yeah, that's fine. I think I'll just make the call and move it to 13.2. Let's not worry too much about it. It was a stretch, and I should take a stretch right now. All right. Next one we have here was another stretch, add Ruby dependencies caching for the static site edit template. I'm actually not too worried about the stretch ones. I'm actually going to filter them out right now. We don't need to have a look at them because if they were important enough, we included them in the 13.2 planning already. Right. Remove YAML front matter from editable content. So that is still in progress. Derek, any updates you want to give us on that?
I just looked at it. So that actually merged, but it looks like if you look at the related MRs, the release post is there. So I don't know if it's worth.
Yeah. So that's fine. The release post. I know this feature is live. The release post, we just need a technical writer to give the final okay on it. It's been written. It's done. So I think we can probably. And I have verified it as well, so we can close this one because the workflow is done, and you've added it to the changelog, so we can close this one off. All right, next one: display non-markdown content in the WYSIWYG mode of the static site editor.
Enrique has provided feedback. I just haven't got to it, and that's what I plan to do. Kind of basically my first main task today. So.
Okay.
I anticipate getting that into the second review stage today.
Okay, so it's currently in review, so I'll just update the label. Do you foresee any challenges with getting it up this week?
I do not, but I haven't seen exactly what Enrique said, so I don't know if Enrique, you have some context to add if you think it might not happen. I just haven't seen it yet.
Enrique says no, so that's good. All right. There's a follow-up here. Resolve, remove YAML from the.
Yeah, so that was an issue that I saw on Thursday when I was doing the dog fooding, and I actually just fixed it, and I'm waiting for the pipelines to finish, and then I'm gonna have assign that to Enrique. So it's fixed.
Okay.
But
Okay. I'm just gonna label it. Okay.
sorry, that was
And then last-
that was a different one. My bad.
It's a different one.
Yeah, this is a follow-up, so let's just call this 13.2. I might be able to get to it. That's my bad.
Okay. Let me just.
Then I think the next one was the one I was referring to.
Okay, cool. Milestone 2. Alrighty. And then, yes, this is the one I saw earlier as well. And it is in review, so that's all good. All right, that clears us out for this one. We go back. The next thing we want to do is have a look at our 13.2 planning issue. So let's just close this off. Right, so I'm only going to cover the P1s and P2s today. The P3s, are literally if we have time, or all the other work is blocked. Again, our overarching theme for 13.2 is getting the static site editor integrated into the handbook. That means wrapping up the non-markdown display of content, as well as the image uploading that Jacques will be focusing on, and then any other work that needs to be done to make it work together. So just having a look at this issue, I know you've identified all the various kind of like flavors or things that we should be accounting for. At this point, do you feel that these issues for the implementation, do they require any further work to get them ready for development? If the initial MR that gives us the infrastructure and the framework for how to deal with it lands?
Yeah, so the cram down one is the one I did this milestone, and that also did kind of the groundwork, if you will. So that's the one we just talked about in terms of the review I need to do. And then the other 4 are already slated for as implementation issues for 13.2. So I'm not really sure if we want to check all these boxes off, except I'll handle the cram down one once I've actually done that, or I'm not sure how you want to track that. But now the last 4 are in individual implementation issues, so it might be better just to track them there. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think in terms of this issue, we can, this is our feature issue. So we can use this as the overall feature and leave it open until all of these are implemented.
Sounds good.
My question then, in terms of the individual implementation issues for these, do you feel like you have a good handle in terms of what needs to be done, or is there more work to be done to explore them in terms of getting them ready for development?
Nope, they're all there. The only one that I might have foreseen complications with is the HTML one. I just don't know, but we'll see.
Okay. Would it need something like an R&D spike? Do you think there might need to be, is there anything that can be done up front before you actually just get into it?
Not really. I mean, like the infrastructure's there. I just don't know if it's going to be complicated in terms of once the implementation's there. I'll raise issues, obviously, if I run into something, but.
Okay, no, that's fine. All right. Right, so this issue is basically the big overarching issue for the future of landing the static site editor integration with the handbook. So what I want to make clear is we're not integrating with the full handbook yet. We're only going to make the static site editor link accessible for the product section. That doesn't mean we're going to block if somebody wants to add a URL to a different page in there and get to it, we'll allow that. We're not going to do any validation to restrict it, but we'll only surface the edit link in the UI for the product section. There's enough of variation of the content in product that allows us to test a lot of fringe cases and so on. And where I expect most of our work will be is, once we've implemented all the handling of the different content, is fringe cases, like things that are written slightly differently or so on. So I'm sure that things will come up. Enrique is kind of like going to be our quarterback for this milestone. He's going to be the one that keeps an overall view on the integration of the static site editor with the handbook, and that means he could jump in on issues on the handbook to help out anybody there, or he can jump in on issues on the product to help out there. He doesn't have anything specifically assigned apart from make sure that we get the integration done. So he'll kind of like take a broad overview of all the issues and get involved in all of those. So think of him as your quarterback that's coming in to save the game. So where we can pull him in and get him to help us out, please raise your hand and get him to help out where he can. That's his task for this milestone, and I've already spoken to him, and he's keen to take on that challenge. So let's see how this works for us, and if this is a kind of like a model that works for us, maybe we can utilize it down the line on some other things as well. All right, uploading an image using the static site editor. So I've spoken with Jacques earlier today about this. I think it's fairly clearly defined, and we have some initial thoughts around things that we won't do. I know Jacques also asked Michael to kind of like do a bit of a mock-up. There's also been some initial planning done on this. So I feel like this is fairly well developed in terms of getting it ready for development. Here's Jacques asking for a mock-up of the expected UX for this. Just in terms of a reminder, a design or mock-up is not a blocker for proceeding with engineering work. We can always come back and tweak the UI. So in this case, I am going to label this one as ready for development. All right. And this one as well. Okay. The next one is the monorepo refactor. I'll just speak for Chad on this one. So if you go and have a look at this, there's two main streams of work on the monorepo refactor. The first one that we're very close to being finished with is separation, creating separate projects in the repo. So the handbook, we started with the handbook, the blog was already there. We revisited the approach we took with the blog, and so we're almost done with refactoring that. And so we'll probably end off with the separation stream of the refactor in the next week or so. And it mostly revolves around moving the remaining sections of the handbook into the new site, as well as reworking the symlink approach with the blog. And I know Chad spent some time on that recently, and he's got a working solution going for that. So I expect that to come soon. In terms of the other part is the isolation, and that really deals with having separate pipelines, and we're evaluating different approaches to how we can go about that. But essentially, when you make a change to the blog, you should only run pipeline jobs that are specific to the job, and you should only be uploading changes to the review app that relates to the blog and so on. And there's a lot of work to be done there still, but essentially what we're trying to create is for the about GitLab.com repo that has all of these subsites, for the subsite code to be separate from each other, and then as well as the pipelines to be separate from each other. That way we can proceed with as much as possible of as little as possible interference from the various sites working on each other. And we can then also have a more focused approach on optimizing the pipeline for the handbook going forward. So that's what we'll be doing there. Then docs linter. So Celia, this one is on your plate. Do you feel this one requires further work before you can get to implementation on this?
So the problem is clear. Like I read the task and it's pretty clear what I need to do. I need to take a deeper look into the implementation, like how exactly. Maybe there is some like small details that I might have question about them like later. But so far, I think it's like ready, like on the, as a big picture, it's pretty clear what I need to do.
Okay, that's good. This is also one that we will want to bring this functionality into the handbook at a later point. Right now, we're doing it in the GitLab docs project, but eventually we want a similar, there's a lot of links in the handbook that link to specific anchors in there. And I know for a fact there's a bunch of broken ones because I've recently found them. And it would be really good to have this functionality in the handbook as well. So some really important work there that we need to do there. Okay, styling of Markdown content should stay as code styling. So Derek, this one is assigned to you currently. I know Michael is looking at that, and there's also a different one for syntax highlighting of the non-Markdown code. Do you have any view on whether we need more work on this? So this is essentially when you go to the static site editor, let's quickly go there, and you edit this page, and you go to Markdown mode, so that this has more of a, look at the WYSIWYG segment is meant to the alternative view of the editor is the raw source. For now, its purpose is to ensure that any content of the page so in the editor can be edited in some fashion. So currently the content is styled with some amount of rich formatting. So headers are bold, and it's confusing to have the HTML styling applied to the source. So essentially what they're saying is we want this to look like a code editor. And rather than a markdown editor as such. So the long-term goal is that we will only have WYSIWYG mode, that our WYSIWYG editor will be so powerful and so flexible and dealing with non-markdown, and we'll have the front matter fields editing in the UI, that we won't need the markdown tab. But until we get there, we're providing this as an option for kind of like low-level editing of the file. But what we want to achieve here is not to have the markdown styled in markdown, especially the headings, but rather to have everything as like a code font and single heights and stuff. So I'm hoping it's as simple as overriding the styling, but that is a very simplistic view of a solution, and it might not be. But does that give you at least confidence in terms of what you need to achieve with this?
Yes. I mean, like you said, it looks super straightforward, or there might be a caveat once we dig into it.
Yeah. But but I think from a requirements point of view of what needs to be done, it's ready to get going. All right. I'm actually gonna just YouTube this now. This will be. Alrighty then. Next up, we have improving the information architecture and styling of the success screening static site editor. So Enrique, this one is on you. And we have some designs in here that, that Michael, I believe he's updated it based on the feedback that we originally gave. But you can have a look here. Essentially, we're taking away this summary of changes, which isn't adding a lot of value, especially to a non-engineering member, and it's not really aligned with where we want to go with our product. And it's talking about kind of like how we just kind of like rechange it. I think this is the one where we had most of the discussion. What we might just need to do is to confirm with Michael that the latest version that incorporates all the feedback has been is finalized on this one. So I think, because I think from an iteration point of view, I also said, like we don't want to start with I'll choose the assignee on this page. We just want to change the information architecture and make it clear what the next step is. So I think this one looks like it needs a little bit finalization of the final layout and design and copy that needs to be done. But I think from an overall what we need to do, it seems clear that it's ready for development. From a, we need to change. We're not changing the functionality, we're changing the content and the look and feel of the page. Would you agree with that, Enrique?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. All right. And next up, we have using the WYSIWYG editor on mobile causes inconsistent jump to top behavior. So this is one that we'll try and tackle in this release because it is quite a jarring experience from a user experience point of view in mobile, and mobile is a valid use case for our editor. So we will have a look at that. This one is ready for development because it's more a case of just getting into it and fixing it. I'm just going to upload the label here. Add edit this page in with ID links to the top of the handbook pages. So Enrique, this is assigned to you as well. So right now, one of the main issues is the discoverability of the edit pages, edit links on the handbook. So if we go to a handbook page, the difficulty is that you have to go all the way to the bottom to find it here. Now, in a very soon iteration, as soon as I think this merges the Derek's MR, we'll have the maintained by section here at the top, and the idea is that we add those links to edit the page just below that. I don't think we've done a design yet for this. I also don't think we really need a design. I think we can, because it's a simple one, we can add the links to that section, and we can ask Michael to have a look at it in the review app rather than waiting on the design for that. So would you agree with that? Are you comfortable that it's ready for development in that sense?
Yeah, that's okay.
Cool. write it in. Next, we have check that code owners are valid users and groups. So Vasily, I know we talked about this one specifically around how we want to potentially use the validation that they will be building in GitLab, the product, to validate it. But for now, the first iteration, we'll do a kind of like a light validation around this. Is there any further kind of like information you need before we can classify this one as ready for development?
So I think it depends. If this issue is like to provide a full validation, that I need to wait because I want to check with Carrie and she's on vacation this week to figure out like who is working on what and if I'm gonna tackle this validation stuff on the GitLab side or she's gonna do it. And so yes, if it's like light validation, then yeah, there is no blockers.
Yeah, I think we should update this to be a light validation rather than a full version. I think we should definitely align with the validation that they want to add to GitLab product and do that as an iteration. So I think we should go with an initial version and maybe we can have a look at the requirements. And so I'll leave this one in. Let me move this to label. So this is planning. Oops. Planning breakdown. I'll work with you so that we just clarify the requirements for what we want to achieve in the light version of the validation for this milestone. All right. Then we have show last updated information and link to page history. So this is one I believe we looked at previously and we ran into some issues. What we want to do is, in addition to kind of like showing the maintained bias, we want to surface kind of like what the last date was that that the page was updated, and just provide a link back to the history in GitLab to the file. So that would be essentially just a link to when you review any file and you go to its history. So essentially it will give you the commit history of the file. So it will be a link through to the GitLab product. So that's one part of it. And the other part is just to show the last updated date. And we discussed if we can't get the full kind of like history, if a file was updated long ago, we might exclude it, and we'll show the last updated date for the ones where we are confident and we can show an accurate date. But I think this is one that we might just want to kind of like flesh it a little bit further to make clear what our requirements are for this. So I won't mark this one as ready for development yet, because I'm still planning breakdown. So we'll work on this one out just a little bit. All right, next up is improving the offline documentation experience for air-gap instances. So this is more of this is not to actually implement this one. We're just going to do some initial R&D. Vasily, Jacques, and I met last week to have a synchronous discussion about what it is that, what's the challenge and what are our options. Jacques asked some clarifying questions. We got some initial answers to that. So I think right now what we need to do is revisit our initial kind of like assumptions and factor in these answers. I personally feel it still leans more to a more enhanced embedded /help of the docs rather than including the docs in it. So we'll have to look. Search is still an issue, and especially because the GitLab Elasticsearch isn't available on all versions of the product. It's only in the paid for ones. So that's something we need to consider. So this one is definitely still planning breakdown, and we're not doing the full product yet. We're just going to do some R&D to see what the best, to validate the proposed path that we're suggesting, and see if it's the right one to go down. All right, and with that, we've covered all of our P1s and P2s. I'm not going to go into the P3s, as I mentioned. These are ones that we'll only look at and get to if we run into blockers and other work, or if we have some available time and we can deal with fleshing them out at a later stage. So with that, we come to the end of the section where we wanted to review it. Just a reminder, our focus is this week is getting kind of like clarity and confirmation that we have what we need to be able to start the week next week, hit the road running, and so that there aren't any major blockers. If we have any dependencies on Michael, let's surface it early so that he can have a look at that this week, and we can make sure we get all of those things in. All right, with that, over to you, Eric, for a Gitter update.
Okay, so last week we had a call with John and Chad about getting to know Gitter, onboarding sort of knowledge on better merge request reviews, more context. It's not just a human linter, quality merge request reviews. So the recording's available there. The document for referencing all the links and clicking through things is right below. That's it for me. Back to you, John.
Cool. Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Sorry that we went over a little bit. And I hope you have a good day and a good week. And please do shout if you need any help with clarifying any of 13.2 issues. Cheers.